Good evening, 8 o'clock in London on a Wednesday night. That means it's time for Golden Nugget Nation. My name is Gary Jenkins. I have the Q&A session at this point in time each week. Going to change the format a little bit, as those of you who have been following me for a few months know that, I was involved in a pretty hefty accident. Golden Nugget Nation kind of came to a stop because of it. I received a traumatic head injury in the process, and it's become very, very difficult for me to follow conversations sometimes, and also remembering simple things, sequencing what I want to say, etc. And I've been working through all these issues now for almost 8 months. But it's time to just set it all aside. I'm experimenting. I'm changing the format a bit. This is no longer going to be like a 30-minute event. I'm just going to answer a question and we'll move on from there. But tonight, what I want to talk about is what is it you want? What do you dream of having? What do you believe you could have or should have in your life that's currently missing? And it's really something that bothers you because it isn't there. Now, what I want to speak about tonight is this concept, because I like what Carl Sandberg, the poet from North America, said. He said, nothing happens, ... but first a dream. Think about it. I recall as a young man wanting to have a girlfriend or wanting to have a date. I used to think about certain girls. You know what they say when you are what you think? Well, back then, at that time in my life, I think I thought about girls 24/7, 365. And even though I was thinking about them all the time and virtually nonstop, I never became one. So you are not what you think you are. But what I discovered for myself was the fact that in this process, I started thinking about what I would do with them. Where would I go? How would I show them a good time? And there were a lot of girls that I eliminated, not because I didn't think I could get their attention or I wouldn't be valued by them. Most of the time, it was situations like, do I like their sense of humor? Do they appreciate mine? If they don't, then there's no sense in having a date. So it was all of this sequencing and things that went on. And then finally I started asking girls out for a date. And I recall the very first one I asked out, I was shaking on the telephone, calling her up, asking her if she'd like to go to a movie with me. And I was waiting for her to say no. That's what I really thought. And she said, well, Gary, I just need to go check the family calendar and see if we have anything coming up at that time, which I figured was a great prelude to a no. And she came back. She says, yes, Gary, I'm so excited. I'm all free that evening. I've already talked to my parents. They've agreed. They like you. Yeah, let's go do this thing, And I was like, she said, yes. Okay, bye. I'm just down. But that phone call would never have happened if I hadn't had the dream. When I'm talking to entrepreneurs, I have some people who sit back and say, look at this guy. He started way after me and he's so far up. Okay. You're not to compare yourself to that guy or any other person. You only compare yourself to the person you were yesterday to who you are today. Because this whole progress thing is your progress, not somebody else's. It's not a race to the finish line. And I hate that bumper sticker that says, the person at the end who has the most toys wins. No, you're not winning anything. You're not going to take them anywhere with you. You're most of your toys are going to be obsolete in 10, 15 years. Nobody's going to ever want them. You thought they had a lot of value and they don't. But you have to find what it is that you want for yourself. This takes a lot of clarification of to what your values are about. This also takes into clarification what are your finances about? What are your legal obligations? Let's just be really honest. I mean, if you have children that you're responsible for their support, for their education, etc., you can't just say, oh, I'm just going to make X amount, shut down, no more money, and I'm leaving. And I'm not going to come back, because that's not going to work, because you're going to be in conflict with your values and your obligations with these people, your children, maybe universities, maybe medical obligations, etc., because these children are your responsibility. You don't just get to walk away and say, oh, no more responsibility. I'm out of here because I've decided to go live in Costa Rica for the rest of my life. No, that doesn't work that way. What you have to do is you have to really sit down and say, what is it I want? And your dream can not be somebody else's dream. When I first started trying to dabble in being an entrepreneur, having my own business, etc., one of the things that really frustrated me with the whole process was people would say, well, what is it you want? What do you dream of having? I didn't have a dream. If I wanted to do something in the world, I was always asking my wife, is it okay if I do this? Is it all right? What do you think about that? There's nothing wrong with that process. But what I kept trying to do is chase somebody else's dream, because I was getting their opinions about what it is that I should want. And the breaking moment for me was when I realized that one of the things that I really wanted was to have the freedom to have quality time with my children that was uninterrupted for weeks at a time. That is what I wanted. Now, in the reality of life, usually we have an 8 to 9 that people are going to, or you have your own business where you're responsible for employees and payroll and everything else. And you are a startup and you're watching every penny and you're making sure that everybody's on task, and that anything that you've assigned, you're actually micromanaging it to make sure it's exactly the way you want it to be, because this is your name, this is your product, this is your baby. And how do you say, okay, I'm going to take the children and we're going to be gone for 2 months because we're going to drive all across the continent here and see all these great historical landmarks, and talk about them and about what our history is about and what is significant about these people and how does it fit into who you have become today, etc. You just can't do it. It's not available to you. But for me, the dream was about freedom and about having a real deep relationship with my children that came from an abundance of quality time. And so let me just share with you just a little thing that happened for me. This is back in about 1992. a colleague of mine asked me if I would be interested in going on an expedition to Peru. You know, kind of out of the blue. He said, look, I know you're really into the outdoors. I know that you know an awful lot about um, being in jungle. I know you know about how to camp. I know how you know how to uh, do a lot of survival things because you were in the military and you lived in the jungle and stuff like that. And you're the only person I know that's actually got that kind of a background. He says, the other thing is I know you're really good at hard work and I know that you can keep a secret. And I said, okay, that's great. He says, what I'm trying to put together is 10 men who have teenage boys. Well, that was me. I had two teenage boys at the time. They said, I want to go down to Peru. He says, because I know at the headwaters of the Amazon where there's potential gold deposits. And I have an agreement with the Peruvian government, 50-50 split on anything we take out of the river. Sounded like fun. Minimum commitment, 90 days. 90 days with my two boys out in the jungles, away from all the influences of modern life, with a group of 10 other or 9 other men and their sons who are pretty much like-minded as to our value systems, etc. I didn't even have to think twice about it. I just kind of came home and told the wife, look, I'm taking a leave of absence from work. No problem. We have plenty of money in the bank. All the bills are covered and stuff. I'm taking the two boys, 90-day adventure, and I will be back. We were back a little bit sooner than we wanted to be. One of the problems was we started really bringing out a lot of gold out of the river, and the government decided that they wanted far more than their 50% share, especially when the quantities were really getting out there. And the end result was the Army came in, took over the claim. Government ministers had created their own little mining company by just jumping our claim, basically. But we were able to each come out with several years' income for ourselves from the gold. And as long as it stayed in the form of nuggets, etc., it was not taxable. So we could just take it out over time, etc. It was a wonderful experience. And I will never forget my two boys who first got there. Ew, I don't really like this jungle thing. There's bugs everywhere. They couldn't get themselves out of the river. They couldn't stop mining. They couldn't wait until they saw their Indian friends who would come out of the jungle, and we would trade for, maybe a bird that they had taken out with a dart, with them for, a can of peaches, something that they had never eaten before, but they just were overwhelmed with how it tasted and the texture and all that kind of stuff. But they loved it. They absolutely loved it. We went through the terror of having the Army coming in all of a sudden and basically taking all of our equipment and locking everything up and, exiting us out of the country. We had all of that stuff, and we kind of came home. But my sons and I, for a decade, had stories to share with each other and our experiences and our binding to each other from that experience. Now, I don't want to just say that I only had such an experience with just my boys, because I had one with each one of my daughters as well, where we would take off and maybe spend a few weeks at a time, just, father and dad, dad and daughter, doing what they really enjoyed. But at the same time, I got to share in the experience with them and built that really tight relationship. That is what had value for me. You might notice in this photograph that's behind me, There's a sailing catamaran. Now, that isn't exactly what I'm looking for. I want a sailing catamaran, but it would be a lot bigger. Let me tell you what a sailing catamaran is like. It's a boat that has an apartment on it, and lots of room and etc. in that regards. And a sailing one, as long as you've got wind, as long as you've got ocean, you can get there. You can usually get there. And that is, for me, the dream. That is what wakes me up in the morning. And the last kind of thought in my mind at night is, how do I get there? What do I need to do? And I keep raising my vibrations to it. And as I go along, I start refining what that catamaran is going to be. It's not going to be this one. It is going to be a glorious sunreef. It's going to be about an 80-footer. And let me tell you, folks, there's not going to be a dangling dinghy on the back. It's going to be sitting right on a dive deck. You know, I can put that thing in the water, and I've got a dive deck, and I can dive off of it. I have scuba tanks. I got everything I need on there. I know exactly what I'm going for. Problem is, I don't have any photographs of it that are mine. They belong to somebody else. I can't really put them on. But this is royalty free, so there it is. Find your dream. Be honest with yourself. Eliminate what you think you should, what you think other people think you should. You can only do this for you. And you need to get your values very, very clear. Because once you find what that object is that turns you on, that keeps you awake at night because you didn't move any closer to it today, and how are you going to get closer to it tomorrow? That is what's going to make you the success that you were born to be. And it's always in the simplest details. I just got one more thing I want to share with you. It's a tale of two men. One guy wanted a Ferrari, just like Magnum PI, a red Ferrari. That's what he wanted. Another gentleman that I knew, he just wanted a family van. He had 6 children. He wanted something that he could transport them all in comfortably. His wife and he had 2 standard sized cars. They could put half the children in one and half the children in the other, but they didn't like that. They just wanted to travel as a family. And when the guy was successful and received enough money that he could go out and buy the van that he wanted and pay cash for it and have exactly that much money sitting in his bank account, because that was his goal. Whatever he paid for that van that he was going to buy, that when he did it, his bank account would have exactly the same amount of money as what that cost of the van was when he was done with the whole transaction. And in a year and a half's time, he had it all together. He went out and bought the van, and I walked over and I was, wooing and wowing and how amazing this is. And, wow, it must feel really good when you're driving it. And, what do you kids think about it? And how wonderful is it being that you're all together in the same vehicle? That's what a leader does. That's how you serve them as a leader. But I brought the guy that wanted the Ferrari. And as we're driving home, he says, man, I just can't believe he got excited about having that van. He says, man, I'd shoot myself in the head rather than have one of those things. Man, I want a Ferrari. And I said, but that was his dream. That was his vision. That was his goal, not yours. And you need to be excited, because if he can have his dream, that means you can have your dream. Now, as far as that Ferrari goes, he decided against the Ferrari and decided to get himself a Maserati because he wanted something that was only 42 inches tall. And he got his Maserati 2.5 years later, paid cash for it, and had exactly the same amount of money in his bank account when all the transactions were over. Go chase your dream. I'm chasing mine. Catch you all next week. Have a great week. Welcome to February. Fabulous February. Have a great evening. Bye.